But thank you so much for being here and for responding to some of these questions.
You're welcome.
We think these are the kinds of issues that most Oregonians are probably looking at and going, well, how do they really stand on these kinds of things? And one of them, of course, is an issue that's probably generating the most interest, not only nationally, but in the governor's race here as well, and that is the issue of abortion and a woman's right to choose. And so the question becomes, how far will you go to protect Oregon's current laws as it pertains to reproductive rights?
Well, Oregonians are fortunate that we have the strongest reproductive health access laws on the books, including access to abortion. Oregonians believe in access to health care. They don't want the government in these decisions. And with the U.S. Supreme Court decision, it's a top-of-mind issue for Oregonians. I am 100% committed to making sure we have access to all reproductive health care here in the state. I'm the only candidate endorsed, for example, by Planned Parenthood PAC of Oregon because of my commitment, because I helped pass the law that we have today. What's interesting in this race is this isn't a time where you can just be okay on this issue. Oregonians are looking for people who are champions on reproductive freedom. It is a life and death issue for women in our state and around the country. And so I'm not only going to protect what we have, but make sure we do more to help anybody in our state who needs help. Right now, remember, Oregonians on the border with Idaho don't have access to health care because of what's happening in Idaho. This is not an intellectual exercise. This is happening to people right now in Oregon.
Yeah, and that leads me to the next part of that question, and that is if a bill comes to your desk as governor that strengthens abortion rights here in Oregon, would you sign it?
I would definitely do everything I can and would support strengthening what we're doing here now to provide access to health care. And my opponents are very clear. Christine Drazan supports banning abortion, and Betsy Johnson is not willing to champion the issues at this moment in time. She's like, I'm pro-choice, but I don't want to do more. That's not how I look at this. We have to do everything we can to provide access to health care.
And on the other side of that coin, if a bill comes to your desk that chips away further at Oregon's right to choose, would you sign that?
I would not undermine anything we have today. I would veto anything that undermines the protections and rights that we have today.
Yeah. Okay, Oregon suffers from an urban-rural divide, as you know, as so many states do. Yeah. Is there anything in your plan that would help mend that divide, and if so, what?
Yeah. Well, we see that divide everywhere, not just in Oregon. I will be a governor for the entire state. And what that means to me is being outside of Salem, being in community around the state, listening to people about the issues that matter to them. I think that there are very important issues that we can all agree on. We all want to have housing and good schools, and for rural areas, making sure access to water. Let's sit down, let's work through those issues. And when I bring people into the room in Salem, making sure all perspectives are actually considered. That's how you break down those divides. People want to be heard, they want to be part of the conversation, because every part of the state matters. And so that is my commitment as the next governor.
You brought up the issue of water. Let's talk about that. The drought continues to plague the West in a big way. It's probably not going to slow down anytime soon. If the choice lands on your desk to reallocate water to the environment and recreation versus farming, which side do you come down on, or do you come down on a side?
I don't think it's an either-or conversation. I think we have to approach this issue with a balanced approach. We have multiple users, our agricultural sector, our residential use, obviously recreation. How do we protect the fish? So what's happening in our streams? All these things are important. We're at a moment where we have the resources if we conserve more and really be more intentional about how things are being used. We have some very outdated practices of water use. We have to revisit them, work together. There's some really innovative things happening here in Central Oregon that I think we can model around the state. We don't have to fight over this. We have to figure out, we have a limited resource, how do we all use it better together? And I think that is possible, and as governor, that I have a key role in making that happen.
And because it is limited, that means that there's the potential that a governor, you, someone else, or someone down the road will have to make that choice. Do you see that time coming? Or do you see...
I think that's down the road. I mean, certainly not in the next 4 or 5 years. But one of the things that will help us, and one of the things I've supported while I was in the legislature, is how do we understand how much water we have? We're not doing a good job right now understanding how much water is available. That is your first step, right? Because you don't want to say to other people, here, you can use this water, when we don't actually have it. we have to have realistic expectations. So the people who have the water now and who have the water rights, how are they being used? How can we best manage that, conserve it, so more people can have access? But we have to understand what we're actually using right now, and that is a bit of a challenge here.
Yeah. Let's talk about the issue of homelessness
Yeah.
in Oregon, and really, for that matter, around the country. It is one of those things where every day people are holding up politicians who are what they call the worst offenders when it comes to allowing this situation to get out of control. Not pointing fingers or anything, but what is your approach to dealing with Oregon's critical homeless situation and population?
Well, it's the number one issue that I hear from Oregonians around the state, in every part of the state. And while I want to praise what's happening here, for example, in Bend, with a new navigation center, shelters, the Veterans Village, more affordable housing, we have to do like triple that, right, to really make sure people have housing. We have to urgently work with people who are living on the streets. And for me, that means more outreach teams working tent by tent to talk to individuals, connect them to services, get them into shelter, get them into housing. That's why I supported converting motels to transitional shelters. I know there's another one going on here in Central Oregon. It has worked. When people go from a tent to a room with a locked door and get some services, they're like, I'm stable, I can move into an apartment. We're gonna have to do that, and as governor, I'm not gonna rest until we get everybody off the streets.
Yeah. The minimum wage in Oregon is at $13.50 right now. Is that too high, not high enough? And if so, what's your plan?
Well, I think you probably know I worked to increase the minimum wage. We've been phasing it over the last 5 years. I worked at Oregon Food Bank for many years. I saw what it meant when people worked hard and couldn't put food on the table. I'm a strong supporter of the minimum wage. I think it is now going to increase over time in a predictable fashion. I don't think we need to change it. What we do need to do is make sure we have good paying jobs so people can meet their basic needs.
Yeah. Measure 114, maybe one of the most restrictive, if passed, gun measures in the country. Does it go too far? Not far enough? Why?
Well, you know, new polling is showing that 4 out of 5 Oregonians want to have increased gun safety regulations, right? They want to make sure we stay safe. The shooting here in Bend, unacceptable, tragic. We have to do more. I do support the ballot measure. I think it's a reasonable next step to support both reasonable gun owners who are responsible and follow the law and help keep guns out of the hands of folks who shouldn't have them.
Yeah. What do you say to the folks that look at this measure, look at the potential passage of this measure and say, here they go, they're taking our guns?
Well, and I have no interest of taking people's guns away. What I want to make sure we have is reasonable precautions, background checks, you know, making sure that someone who has an automatic weapon has a limited ability to do a lot of damage, which is what the magazine restrictions are. Oregonians want to be safe. And one of the other things that I support is changing the age from when someone can buy a weapon of war from 18 to 21. Mm-hmm. That's going to help us stay safer.
Yeah. Has your campaign taken any funds from the NRA?
I have not. In fact, I have a failing grade with the NRA. My opponents have A ratings with the NRA.
Okay. Oh, good to know. Decisive politics have now entered the boardrooms of school systems across the country, and certainly here in Oregon as well. We've got multiple examples of taxpayers bullying school board members and even beyond that kind of thing. What can you do as governor to protect school systems from this kind of divisive political discourse?
I was just speaking to some of the Bend Lapine school board members this morning. They have a very tough job. They need to focus on educating our students and not being harassed at school board meetings. It's not acceptable. I think we should have civil discourse in our country and in our state. As governor, saying that's not acceptable is job one. Also, the legislation that was recently passed to make sure that when school boards become radicalized, they can't just, you know, fire a school administrator just because they don't like what they're saying. If they're standing up for our kids, we need to support our educators. And I just want to praise our school board members for doing the hard work. But we need to treat each other with respect. And I will also say, I think this divisive effort is intentional. I think there are people sitting around saying, we're going to disrupt school boards for political means. I don't want to play politics with our kids, and I think that's what's happening.
Yeah. Is there a legislative approach to this?
Well, I think helping school board members get the tools to be able to manage. We were just talking about this morning. It's like, how do I help de-escalate these situations so we can actually get the work done? And frankly, I think rank and file, everyday Oregonians need to support their school board members. If you don't like what's happening, show up at those school board meetings too and say, that's not acceptable behavior. And that we all have to be engaged here. You just can't like stand aside and let it happen.
Yeah. All right. Tina Kotek, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
You bet.